You know the thing about family is you're supposed to be able to count on them. I'm Naomi Brooks, 32, and for years I was the one they all counted on. I was the rock, the quiet sister who paid the bills, the perfect daughter who always stepped up. I did it all hoping one day they'd see me, really see me. But the night my mom called to tell me I was banned from my sister's wedding unless I apologized, I finally saw the truth. To them, I wasn't family. I was just a walking, talking bank account. That night, I made a choice that changed everything. A choice that started with a one-way flight and a plan to cut them off completely. They said I was nothing without their money. So I decided to find out what would happen when they had nothing without mine. You have to wonder when the money runs out what's left of the family you thought you knew. Let me take you back to where it began. My apartment, which usually felt like my safe haven after a long day at Harbor Financial Solutions, now felt suffocating. I went to the window, staring out at the blurred lights of the city. The rain was coming down in a steady, cold drizzle, and it felt like it was washing away any last shred of hope I had left. The incident my mother was referring to happened at Chloe's birthday dinner. Chloe had thrown a huge party at a trendy Italian place in the suburbs. She was showing off her new Lexus and talking about a trip to Miami she was planning. My mother was fawning over her as usual. Someone asked how Chloe managed to afford all this, and without thinking I joked, "She's good at finding people to foot the bill." It was meant to be a light-hearted jab, but it hit a nerve. Chloe's face went from a confident smirk to a scowl. My mother shot me a look that could curdle milk. The rest of the dinner was filled with uncomfortable silence. Now they were demanding an apology for a comment that was the truth. The truth that I had spent years hiding. My mind reeled, pulling up every single instance of their entitlement. There was the time I paid for Dad's unexpected cardiac surgery. A sudden, terrifying reality that put them on the verge of financial ruin. They said they would pay me back, but they never did. The bill was almost $8,000. Then there were the household bills, the ones that mysteriously vanished from my parents' minds until they were facing a shut-off notice. I'd quietly pay them off every month, sometimes a few $100s at a time, for 5 years. The total was over $12,000. And then there was Chloe. Her lavish lifestyle wasn't from a successful career. It was built on a foundation of my money. She needed money for a new wardrobe, for her credit card debt, for her portion of the rent. She was always just about to get her big break as a social media consultant, and I was the bank. It was always a few $100s here, $1,000 there. It seemed so small at the time, just a little help for my sister. But when I added it up in my head, the number was a gut punch, over $15,000. All of it a complete secret from her fiancé David. They thought I was just some cash machine that ran on guilt. I had always been so desperate for their approval, for a crumb of the affection they showered on Chloe. I always hoped that one day they would see all my sacrifices and finally say, "Naomi, we see you. We appreciate you." But that moment at dinner and this call proved that all my hopes were an illusion. To them, I was just a walking ATM, and now they were mad that my jokes were affecting their ability to withdraw money. The thought made a cold knot form in my stomach. I got up from the couch and started pacing the small living room. The rain outside was relentless, now drumming a rhythm against the glass. The hum of the city below was a distant, mournful sound. My whole life I'd been the responsible one. The one who worked hard, saved money, and quietly supported everyone. And for what? So I could be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't shame. It was a cold, hard anger. It started deep in my gut and spread through my chest, a fire that burned away all the old pain. The tears I had been holding back for years finally fell, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage. I looked at my phone again. The screen was still on my mother's name. "You are banned from your sister's wedding." The words echoed in my head. Okay, I thought. Fine, if that's what you want. I'll make sure you get exactly what you've been asking for. But you won't get an apology. You'll get something far, far worse. Something that will show you who I am and who I was all along. With a shaking hand, I opened my laptop. I wasn't just going to ban myself from the wedding, I was going to disappear from their lives completely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I navigated to a flight booking website. The first destination that popped into my head was a place Chloe had always dreamed of visiting but could never afford. The Maldives. I was going to give them a taste of what a life without me was truly like. My revenge would be silent, and it would start the moment I left the country. The clock was ticking. I stared at the screen, the blinking cursor, a tiny, relentless reminder of the choice I was about to make. The clock on my laptop showed 11:41 at night. The city outside was a sleepy blur, but my mind was racing. I had to do this. I needed to do this. My hands still trembling slightly typed in my travel dates. I booked a flight that was leaving in less than 6 hours. The ticket cost a small fortune, but I didn't care. For the first time, money felt like a tool for my freedom, not a leash holding me to my family. I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my decisions settling over me. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. The irony of it all was almost poetic. For years, Chloe had talked about her dream of going to the Maldives. She had even created a Pinterest board for it filled with photos of turquoise water over water bungalows and pristine white sand. She had asked me to help her save for it, to chip in for her dream vacation. Of course, the money I gave her always disappeared into some new outfit or another fancy dinner. She never made it to the Maldives, and now I was going in her place, using the money I had earned to find my own peace. My mind went back to all those years, all those unspoken agreements and quiet sacrifices. I thought about the first time I got a bonus at my job, a crisp $1,000 check. I had planned on buying a new sofa for my tiny apartment, something that would make it feel more like a home. But then my mother called. She needed money for a new water heater. The old one had broken and they couldn't afford to fix it. Without hesitation, I sent them the money. I never did get that new sofa. It was always something. A utility bill, a car repair, a down payment on a boat they wanted but didn't need. My list went on and on. I finally got up from the couch. The first thing I packed was my laptop and my phone charger. Then I went to the file cabinet in my bedroom. I pulled out a plain manila folder and began filling it with every financial document I could find. Bank statements showing all the money I'd wired to Chloe and my parents over the years, receipts for credit card payments and utility bills I had paid for them. The final detailed invoice from my father's cardiac procedure. It was a tangible record of all my unseen contributions. I carefully placed the folder in my carry-on bag. It was my insurance policy, my proof, and my quiet weapon. I then went to my closet and pulled out a few practical things. A swimsuit, a pair of sandals, a few light dresses. I wasn't packing for a vacation, I was packing for an escape. My movements were deliberate, almost robotic. I wasn't thinking about the ocean or the Sunday, I was thinking about the relief I would feel when I was thousands of miles away from all of this. I was thinking about how their perfect world built on my silent support was about to crumble. As I zipped up my bag, I got a text from Chloe. "Don't forget to call Mom and apologize. We don't want to make things awkward with David's family. No mention of my feelings. No concern for my feelings. Just an order." She was treating me like an employee she could boss around. I didn't reply. I just put my phone on silent and packed it away. I grabbed my keys and my wallet and took one last look around my apartment. It was quiet, organized, and mine. The place where I had worked tirelessly, saved every dollar, and dreamed about a life I could never quite have because of the people who were supposed to love me most. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of purpose. This wasn't the end of my life, it was the beginning. I made my way to Logan International Airport. The check-in process was a blur. The security line, the gate number, the boarding call, it all felt surreal. As I stepped onto the plane and found my seat, I pulled out my phone one last time. I saw a few texts from my mom asking if I had called Chloe yet. I didn't open them. The plane took off, and I looked out the window at the city lights of Boston, shrinking into a glittering patchwork below. I watched them fade until all I could see was the dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean and the stars above. The air in the cabin was cool and dry, and for the first time in my life I felt truly alone, but not lonely. I was free. I was in control. And the revenge was just about to begin. The flight was long, a slow blur of movies I didn't watch, and lukewarm coffee. My mind was on a constant loop, replaying every moment of my life, every time I had been taken for granted. The plane descended through the soft clouds, and the world below came into focus. A scattering of tiny green islands surrounded by water so clear it looked like a swimming pool. The Maldives. It was even more beautiful than all of Chloe's Pinterest boards combined. As I stepped off the plane, a wave of heat hit me thick and humid, a complete contrast to the chilly Boston air I had left behind. But it was a welcoming heat. I was on a small speedboat heading to my resort, and the vast open ocean around me felt like a cleansing. The water shimmered with 1,000 shades of blue and green, and for a fleeting moment, I just felt a sense of awe. Then the purpose of my trip came rushing back. The revenge had to begin. I got to my overwater bungalow and immediately set my laptop on the small desk overlooking the ocean. I was a financial analyst by trade, so this was my comfort zone. Numbers, data, and cold, hard logic. My hands moved with a familiar rhythm. First, I logged into my online banking account. I had already transferred most of my savings into a separate account, but there were still a few things left to do. The first was to completely freeze my parents' shared credit card account that was tied to my own. I went to the account security page and clicked freeze. A small window popped up to confirm, and I clicked yes, without a moment's hesitation. The deed was done. Then I logged into the websites for their utility companies. I had the account numbers and all the necessary information memorized from years of paying their bills. With a few clicks, I canceled the automatic payments I had set up. For their gas, water, and electricity, I entered the new information service cancellation requested. It was all so simple, so quiet, and so devastating. Next came Chloe. I logged into her credit card accounts. She had several, all with high balances. I had paid them off more times than I could count. I went to the authorized users section and removed myself from the accounts. No more emergency payments, no more bailing her out when she spent too much on her business trips to Miami. The relief was immense. I also knew they had been using my family phone plan. Chloe and my parents were on a shared plan under my name. I called the customer service line for the phone company, and after navigating a maze of automated menus, I finally got through to a representative. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'd like to remove 2 lines from my family plan." The representative's voice was bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to my grim mission. "Certainly, ma'am. Can I have the numbers you'd like to remove?" I rattled off my mother's and Chloe's numbers. The woman on the other end didn't ask questions. She just processed the request. "All set," she said. "The 2 lines have been removed from your plan. They should receive a notification on their devices soon." A small shudder went through me. I imagined Chloe and my mother getting that text message from the phone company. I imagined their confusion, their frantic calls to each other. This wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't a public confrontation. This was a silent, meticulous act of defiance. My revenge was a series of well-planned moves on a chessboard, and I had just made my first few. With all the financial ties officially severed, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The air in the bungalow felt lighter. I walked out onto the small balcony and sat in a chair watching the fish swim in the clear water below. It was hard to believe that just a day ago I was sitting in my Boston apartment, my world feeling like a prison. Now I was in paradise, and I was finally in control of my own life. The quiet was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves. It was the calm before the storm. I knew it wouldn't be long before the phone calls and text messages started to flood in, and I was ready for every single one of them. The silence was beautiful. The quiet hum of the air conditioner in the bungalow, the soft lap of the waves just below my balcony. I closed my laptop, put my phone on a side table, and for a few blissful hours I didn't think about my family at all. I just sat there watching the sun dip below the horizon in a spectacular burst of orange and pink. The world felt so vast and so new, and I felt so incredibly small, yet completely in control. I woke up the next morning feeling more rested than I had in years. I had breakfast on my private deck, a plate of fresh fruit, and a cup of black coffee. As I ate, I watched a couple of dolphins playing in the distance. The peace was surreal, almost overwhelming. I thought about the chaos that was probably unfolding back home, and a small, bitter part of me smiled. This was the calm before the storm. I knew the calls would come. I just didn't know how fast or how furious they would be. They started just as I was getting ready to go for a swim. My phone, which had been silent for hours, began to light up. The first call was from my mother. Her name flashed on the screen, a red alert in my peaceful paradise. I let it ring, and then it went to voicemail. A minute later, a text message popped up. The water just got shut off. Did you forget to pay the bill? Call me immediately. My heart pounded a little faster. It was beginning. I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. I had to remind myself that this was for my own good, for my own freedom. I put the phone on a different setting so the calls wouldn't make a sound and just watched the screen. The calls and texts started coming in a rapid-fire succession. The screen lit up with my mother's name again and again. Then Chloe's name appeared. I could almost hear the frantic, high-pitched sound of her voice. One after another, the calls and messages came. The power just went out. What did you do, Naomi? My mother's message read. My card just got declined. This is a nightmare. I'm at the checkout and I'm so embarrassed. This was from Chloe. Fix this right now. I didn't respond to any of them. I just watched the numbers pile up on my lock screen. The numbers became a game, a strange kind of scorecard. 1 missed call from Mom. 3 from Chloe. Another from my dad. The number was climbing faster and faster. I need money now, Naomi. My flight to our family vacation is in 2 days, and the tickets are not going to hold. Chloe's message was filled with emojis that screamed panic. It was one of the many things she never had to worry about, because I was always there to handle the logistics and the cost. My mother's next message was more desperate. Please, Naomi. I don't understand what's happening. We can't use our credit cards. Everything is frozen. This must be some kind of mistake. Please call us back. This is not the time for this. The wedding is in 2 weeks. I looked at the notifications stacking up on the screen, a testament to a family's unraveling. 1 minute it was my mother's name, the next it was Chloe's. My stomach was in knots, but I refused to answer. I knew that if I did, they would just go back to their old ways. They would manipulate me with guilt, and I would fall for it again. The cycle had to be broken, and this was the only way to do it. I placed the phone face down and took a deep breath. I walked down to the small staircase from my deck to the ocean. The water was warm and inviting. I waded in, slowly letting the gentle current wash over me. The water felt so different from the cold gray ocean of Boston. This was pure warm and cleansing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's financial burdens. The water felt like a physical release, a baptism into a new life. I spent the next hours swimming and enjoying the serenity. The phone was still on the table back in my bungalow, face down. I knew it was probably vibrating with more calls and texts. When I finally came out of the water refreshed and calm, I dried off and walked back up the stairs. I hesitated for a moment before picking up my phone. I braced myself for the worst. But what I saw on the screen was exactly what I had wanted all along. The total count was at 69 missed calls and 132 new messages. I had never felt so much power and peace at the same time. The chaotic storm I had unleashed was in full effect, and I was standing in the eye of it completely serene. I knew they would try to reach me in every way possible, but they had made their choice, and I had made mine. The phone, with its silent, angry screen, lay on the small bedside table as a trophy. I finally put it away, not because I was afraid of what they would say, but because I was finished playing their game. My days in the Maldives were not a traditional vacation. They were a working retreat. I spent my mornings on the balcony, the warm sun on my skin, and the gentle sound of the waves providing a perfect backdrop for the work I was doing. I opened my laptop and began building the real evidence, the evidence that would speak for itself when the time came. My mind was a steel trap when it came to numbers, a skill I had perfected during my years as a financial analyst. I opened a new spreadsheet, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with the story of my family's entitlement. I started at the beginning, my earliest memories of being their financial support. It all started so innocently, so slowly. My parents had told me they were struggling to pay for their health insurance premiums. They were in their late 50s, and they told me it was an unexpected burden. It was a few $100s here and there, a favor for a loving daughter. It added up quickly. I found the first bank transfer I made to them from my checking account, a small transaction from back in 2018. I typed it into the spreadsheet, a date and a dollar amount. Then I moved to the bigger things. The biggest, of course, was my father's cardiac procedure. The insurance company had covered most of it, but there was a significant portion left over, an amount they just couldn't seem to get their hands on. They had called me heartbroken, telling me they were on the verge of losing their home if they couldn't come up with the money. I had wired it to them, every penny of my emergency fund. I pulled up the wire transfer receipt and typed in the date and the exact amount, $8,000. It felt like I was reliving the moment. I remember the relief in my mother's voice, the gratitude she expressed, which I now knew was just a temporary performance. I remember her telling me, "Naomi, you saved your father's life." But they never mentioned it again. It was as if that $8,000 transfer never happened. Next came the utilities. For 5 years I had been their secret benefactor. Every month a bill would appear in my email, an automatic reminder that I had to pay for their water, their electricity, their gas, and their cable. I went through my email archives, finding every digital receipt, every confirmation number. I added it all to the spreadsheet, creating a running total. It was well over $12,000. This was the money they should have been saving for retirement, for their own peace of mind. Instead, they just kept spending. They were living a life they couldn't afford, all because I was too naive to say no. And then there was Chloe. Her expenses were a separate category, a whole different beast. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I was struggling to pay my student loans and save for a down payment, she was buying designer clothes and taking lavish trips. I found the bank transfers I had sent her for rent, for her car payments, for her ever-growing credit card debt. She always promised she would pay me back, but she never did. The total from her alone was well over $15,000. The spreadsheet was starting to look like a full-blown financial audit of my family's dependency. The numbers were staring back at me, cold and unforgiving. As I compiled the data, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt calm. It was like I was putting together a puzzle of my life that I had never fully understood. Every single line on the spreadsheet was a piece of the story, a silent, indisputable fact. I printed out everything, every single receipt, every single bank statement, every single email. I organized it all into a neat, professional-looking folder. It was my truth, my unwritten confession. It was more powerful than any argument I could ever have with them. I knew this folder would be my final answer. It wasn't just a collection of numbers. It was a testament to my years of silent sacrifice. It was the proof of their entitlement, a physical record of the invisible work I had done to hold their lives together. I finished organizing the final document, put the folder in my bag, and zipped it up. I had the sun on my face and the calm of the ocean in front of me. I had everything I needed, and I was ready to go home. My revenge was just a few days old, and a part of me was still reeling from the shock of it all. I spent the next few days in the Maldives, soaking in the sun and trying to process everything that had happened. My phone was still off, but I knew the chaos was still unfolding. I also knew that their panic would eventually turn to anger, and they would start trying to contact me through other means. I was ready for them. But I wasn't just waiting for the storm. I was preparing for it. The resort had a quiet business center, and I spent a few hours there every afternoon, my focus sharp and my mind clear. I had already put together the folder with all the financial documents. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to put together something that would leave no room for doubt, a presentation of irrefutable facts. I spent hours building a detailed spreadsheet, a living document that chronicled every single financial transaction, every gift, every loan, every bill I had paid for my family. The total was now $45,700. It was all there in black and white, a testament to my years of silent sacrifice. I printed out everything and organized it neatly in a bright blue folder. I wrote down the title on the cover, The Brooks Family Ledger. It was a small detail, but it made me feel like I was taking back control, like I was the one who was in charge now. I was no longer the quiet, agreeable daughter. I was a financial analyst with a plan. I also spent some time reaching out to people I knew could help me. The first person I called was my friend James Anderson. We had been friends since college, and he had always been my rock. He was a brilliant corporate lawyer, and I knew I could trust him. I gave him a quick rundown of what I had done, and he listened patiently without judgment. "You did the right thing, Naomi," he said. "You were being taken advantage of. Legally, you're in the clear. You were just a private citizen who decided to stop giving out loans. You're not obligated to pay their bills, and the money you gave them was a gift. They have no legal claim to it." "What if they try to sue me?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. "Let them," he said. "I'll be there to represent you. They're just bluffing. They're trying to scare you into backing down. They've been controlling you with guilt for so long, they don't know any other way to get what they want." His words were like a balm on my soul. They validated my feelings and gave me the courage to continue. I knew that I was doing the right thing, and now I had someone who would have my back no matter what. I also reached out to my boss, Grace Henderson. I had a lot of respect for Grace. She was in her 60s and had built her company from the ground up. She was a no-nonsense woman with a heart of gold. She was also a mother, and I had always admired the way she handled her family life. She was firm, but fair. I trusted her implicitly. I told her I would be out of the office for a little while, and she was supportive. I knew she was the kind of person who would understand what I was going through. I spent the next few days on the phone with James, going over every single detail of my case. He was meticulous, and he helped me put together a comprehensive file that included a detailed timeline, copies of all the bank transfers, and a list of all the bills I had paid. He even sent me a copy of a legal document that I could use if they tried to take any legal action against me. I also spent some time working on something that was just for me. My dream was to go to business school, and I had always wanted to go to Harvard. But I had put off applying for years, always telling myself I was too busy or that I didn't have the money. Now, with all the money I was saving, I knew it was possible. I started working on my application, and I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. It was the first time in my life that I was doing something for myself and not for someone else. The days in the Maldives passed quickly, and before I knew it, it was time for me to go home. I felt completely different. The woman who had boarded that plane just a few days ago was gone. In her place was a new person, someone who was ready to face the world no matter what came her way. I had found my strength, and I was ready to use it. The journey back was nothing like the journey there. On the way to the Maldives, I was running away my mind, a storm of resentment and sadness. Now I was returning, but I wasn't running anymore. I was walking into a new life. The plane ride felt like a victory lap. I was rested, tanned, and filled with a quiet confidence that I had never felt before. I had spent so many years trying to be what everyone wanted me to be. Now, for the first time, I was just being myself. I landed at Boston Logan International Airport, and the cool, damp air was a stark contrast to the tropical warmth of the Maldives. But it didn't bother me. It felt like home. I hailed a cab and gave my address. On the way back to my apartment, I couldn't help but feel like I was a different person, a stranger in my own city. I looked out the window at the familiar streets, the bustling cafes, the hurried people, and I felt a pang of nostalgia for the person I used to be. But the feeling was fleeting. That girl was gone. And I wasn't sad to see her go. The first thing I did when I got home was to take a long hot shower. I let the water wash away all the stress and pain I had been carrying for so long. Then I put on some comfortable clothes and just sat in my living room in the quiet, empty space that was all my own. I had a lot to do, but I wanted to take a moment to savor the peace. The phone was still on silent, a small dark rectangle on my coffee table. I knew it was probably filled with messages from my family, but I wasn't ready to face them just yet. I wanted to do things on my terms. The next morning, I woke up early and went to the gym. I worked out for an hour, feeling the burn in my muscles. It felt good to push myself physically to feel strong and capable. After my workout, I went home and made myself a big breakfast. I ate slowly, enjoying every bite. I was no longer rushing through life, no longer putting myself last. This was my new normal. After breakfast, I finally turned on my phone. The screen was a chaotic mess of notifications. There were a few dozen missed calls and more text messages than I could count. I quickly scrolled through them. Most were from my mother, and Chloe, filled with anger, confusion, and a bizarre sense of entitlement. "You have 2 days to turn on the credit cards, or we're going to miss David's parents' welcome dinner. The utilities are still off. Do you have any idea how much this is going to cost us to get back on? You owe us, Naomi. This is not a game. You are being childish. We need you. Call us back now." I deleted them all without a second thought. They were just words on a screen, and they had no power over me anymore. I knew what I had to do next. I called my friend James. He answered on the first ring, his voice calm and reassuring. "Naomi, you're back. I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said. "I'm back," I said, "and I'm ready." I gave him a quick rundown of what had happened. He listened patiently, taking notes. "Okay," he said. "So far so good. You've done everything right. Legally, you're untouchable. They have no standing to sue you. You've been paying their bills for years and now you've decided to stop. That's a personal choice. They can't force you to pay for their expenses." "What about the money I've given them?" I asked. "The $45,000, that was a gift," he said. "Unless you had a signed document stating that it was a loan, you can't get it back. But they can't force you to pay for anything going forward. Your clean break is exactly what you needed. You have to remember, Naomi, you're the one in control here, not them." His words were a revelation. All these years I had thought I was trapped, a hostage to my family's financial needs. But James's words made me realize that I had always held the power. I was the one with the money. I was the one who could walk away. I just never had the courage to do it. Now I did. I thanked James and hung up. I felt a surge of confidence. I had been preparing for this for years, even if I didn't know it. I had the financial know-how, the legal advice, and the emotional strength to stand my ground. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. I was no longer the quiet, agreeable daughter. I was a force to be reckoned with. And I was ready to face them not as a victim, but as a victor. The day after my return, I went back to work. As I walked into the office at Harbor Financial Solutions, I felt a familiar pang of anxiety. My phone was on silent, and I had already deleted the dozens of text messages that had piled up while I was away. I was ready to face the world, but I wasn't ready to face my boss, Grace Henderson. I had been gone for a week, and I hadn't given her a heads up. I was worried she would be upset, but I knew I had to face her. She was a no-nonsense woman, but she was also fair, and I knew she would understand. I walked to my desk, and she was already there, a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked at me, a smile on her face. "Naomi, you're back. I was wondering when I'd see you," she said. "You look rested. The break did you good." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "Thank you, Grace," I said. "I needed it." "Good," she said. "I'm glad you took the time for yourself. You've been working too hard. Your team missed you, but they managed just fine. You have good people working for you." I smiled. "I know," I said. "They're the best." We talked for a few minutes about work, and then she looked at me with a serious expression. "Naomi," she said, "I know you've been going through some things. I'm not a mind reader, but I've been in this business for a long time, and I know when a person is carrying a heavy load. I'm here for you if you ever need to talk. My door is always open." Her words were a comfort. I felt a lump in my throat. I had always admired Grace, but I had never really known her. She was a private person, and she kept her personal life separate from her work life. But her words were a lifeline. She was giving me an olive branch, an invitation to a friendship I didn't even know I needed. Later that day, I took a break and went to her office. I closed the door behind me and sat in the chair across from her. I took a deep breath. "Grace," I said, "I'm not sure where to start." She smiled. "Just start at the beginning. I have all the time in the world." I told her everything. I told her about my family, about my sister Chloe, about the years of financial abuse. I told her about the wedding, the phone call, and my decision to leave. I told her about the Maldives, about my plan, and about the folder full of receipts and bank statements. I told her about the 69 missed calls and the hundreds of text messages. I told her about the pain, the anger, and the sense of release I felt when I finally cut them off. She listened patiently, her expression a mix of sympathy and respect. When I was finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. She just looked at me, a knowing look in her eyes. "Naomi," she said finally, "I'm so proud of you. What you did took an incredible amount of courage. Most people would have just continued to suffer in silence. But you stood up for yourself. You drew a line in the sand and you said, 'No more.' That takes a special kind of strength." "I don't feel strong," I said. "I feel exhausted." "I know," she said. "But you're on the other side of it now. The hard part is over. Now you can focus on building your new life. You've already done the hardest part. You've saved yourself." "I've been thinking about what you told me a while ago," I said. "About putting myself first. I've been working on my application for business school. I've always wanted to go to Harvard." Grace's face lit up. "That's wonderful. I think that's a fantastic idea. You're one of the smartest people I know. You would be an asset to any business school. I'll even write you a letter of recommendation. I've been wanting to do it for a while now. I know you're going to get in. You've got what it takes. You're a fighter, Naomi. You just never knew it until now." Her words filled me with a sense of purpose and hope. I had a plan, a support system, and a new sense of self-worth. I had always admired Grace, but now I saw her as a mentor, a guide, and a friend. She had given me a gift that was more valuable than any amount of money. She had given me the courage to believe in myself. I had a lot to do, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the right path. I knew I was going to be okay. The following 2 weeks were a strange blend of quiet peace and building tension. I fell into a new routine. I would wake up early, go to the gym, then head to work. At lunch, I'd take my laptop to a quiet corner of the office and work on my application for Harvard Business School. The questions felt different this time. Not like an impossible dream, but like a real, achievable goal. Grace was a huge help. She'd stop by my desk and ask how the application was going, offering advice and encouragement. She even reviewed my essays, her red pen making small corrections that made all the difference. My phone, which had been buzzing nonstop for days, finally fell silent. I hadn't blocked them, but they finally got the hint. The lack of constant texts and calls was its own kind of victory. I knew the silence was temporary. It was the calm before the storm, but I didn't care. I was ready for whatever came my way. The peace was broken 3 days before the wedding. I was on my lunch break eating a salad and working on my application when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat, but I decided to answer it. A woman's voice, which I didn't recognize, spoke on the other end. "Hello, this is Naomi Brooks, right?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. "Yes, this is she," I said. "Who is this?" "Oh, you don't know me," she said. "I'm a cousin of Chloe's fiancé, David. My name is Anna. We met at his family's welcome dinner a few months ago. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I felt like I had to call you." A chill went down my spine. "What's going on?" I asked. "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "the family is just talking. Everyone is talking about you. I heard your mom and Chloe telling everyone that you're unstable, that you had some sort of breakdown, and that you ran away without a word. They're saying you're just trying to ruin the wedding because you're jealous. I even heard your mom say that you've been lying to your family for years, that you've been saying you were a financial analyst, but that you were actually just a high-end personal assistant. My blood ran cold. They were trying to get ahead of the story. They were trying to paint me as the villain before I could even tell my side. It was a classic move, and I was infuriated that I hadn't thought of it myself. I had been so focused on my own plan that I hadn't even considered that they would have one too. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you can tell me? Just that they're all talking about it," she said. "Your sister is telling everyone that you were always jealous of her, that you've never been happy for her. It's all so manipulative. I just wanted to call you and tell you that there are people out there who don't believe them." I thanked her again and hung up the phone. My salad was forgotten. My appetite was gone. I felt a surge of rage so powerful, I had to close my eyes and take a deep breath. They were trying to ruin my reputation, to make me out to be a monster. They were trying to turn everyone against me, so that when I finally did tell the truth, no one would believe me. But I wasn't just going to let them get away with it. This wasn't just a quiet battle anymore. This was a public war. They had chosen their weapon, and now I would choose mine. I had a plan, and I had a folder full of receipts and bank statements. I knew the truth, and I was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The next day, I took the day off work. I went shopping. I didn't buy anything expensive or fancy. I just bought a beautiful, simple dress. It was a deep sapphire blue, and it was a simple, elegant cut. I also bought a small clutch and a pair of matching shoes. I wasn't dressing for a wedding. I was dressing for a war. The day before the wedding, I got a text from my mother. "Naomi, you are being ridiculous. We're on our way to Boston to prepare for the wedding. Please call us. We need to talk. This is your last chance." I deleted the message without a second thought. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming to give me an ultimatum. I wasn't going to be there to accept it. Instead, I took the day to prepare myself. I ironed my dress, shined my shoes, and made sure my hair and makeup were perfect. I wasn't just going to show up to the wedding. I was going to make an entrance. I was going to show them that I wasn't the broken, unstable person they had made me out to be. I was going to show them that I was strong, capable, and that I was done being their victim. I held my head high and walked out the door. My folder was in my hand, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I knew that I was about to face the biggest challenge of my life, but I wasn't scared. I was ready. I was going to the wedding, and I was going to make a statement. And this time it wouldn't be a joke. The air inside the Ritz-Carlton ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. Chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a warm golden glow on the perfectly arranged tables. Everyone was dressed to the nines, their laughter and conversations a low hum in the opulent space. I stood at the entrance, a stark contrast to the festive scene. My sapphire blue dress was simple and elegant, but I felt like a ghost. I took a deep breath, clutching the plain blue folder in my hand, and walked in. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. My mother was the first to see me. Her eyes went wide, a look of pure shock on her face. Her hand flew to her mouth. She immediately started whispering to my father, who turned and looked at me, a blank expression on his face. Chloe, standing at the altar in a stunning white gown, saw me. The smirk that had been on her face all night vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. She started whispering to her fiancé David, who turned and looked at me, a confused expression on his face. I didn't acknowledge any of them. I just walked straight toward the front of the room, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. I felt 1,000 eyes on me. I didn't care. I just kept walking, my head held high. I finally reached the altar, and I stood there a few feet from David. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. "Naomi," he said, his voice a low whisper. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer him. I just looked at Chloe, who was now trembling, her hand gripping David's arm. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady and clear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I know we haven't been on the best of terms lately. I've been a little preoccupied. I just wanted to come here and give you a wedding gift. It's a little unconventional, but I think it's something you and David can both appreciate." I held out the blue folder to David. He took it, his eyes darting from the folder to me, a look of pure confusion on his face. He opened it and his eyes scanned the first page. His face went pale. He looked at Chloe, a look of betrayal in his eyes. Chloe's face was white. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a low growl. "It's a ledger," I said, "of all the money I've given to your new family. The total is $45,700. It's all there in black and white. Every single dollar, every single bill, every single time I paid for a car, repair, a shopping trip, a trip to Miami." A gasp went through the crowd. David's eyes widened. He looked at Chloe, a look of pure betrayal in his eyes. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling. "What is she talking about?" Chloe's face was a mask of pure terror. She looked at me, and her eyes were filled with a hatred so intense it was almost palpable. "Naomi, you're ruining my wedding," she screamed. "You're a liar. You're jealous. You're trying to ruin my life." My mother came running up to the altar, her face contorted with rage. "Naomi, what are you doing?" she shrieked. "You're embarrassing us. Get out." I didn't move. I just stood there, a quiet, immovable force. "I'm not leaving," I said. "Not until everyone knows the truth. I'm not a liar. I have the receipts to prove it. For years I've been paying for your life, Chloe. While you were taking lavish vacations and buying designer clothes, I was working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet. While you were planning your dream wedding, I was paying for your credit card debt. I've given you everything, and all you've given me is a kick in the teeth. This is not about jealousy. This is about justice." The crowd was buzzing now. Everyone was talking, whispering, pointing. David, his face pale, dropped the folder and ran out of the room. Chloe, with a look of pure panic on her face, turned and ran after him, her wedding dress dragging on the floor. My mother stood there, her mouth open, a look of pure shock on her face. My father just stood there, looking at me, his face blank. I looked at them, and for the first time in my life I felt a sense of peace. I had told my truth. I had stood my ground, and I had won. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their broken lives. The chandeliers still glittered, the lilies still smelled sweet, but the magic was gone. I had made my statement, and this time it was more powerful than any joke. I left the Ritz-Carlton, leaving behind the chaotic symphony of a shattered wedding. Taking a deep breath, I felt the crisp Boston air soothe my skin, but inside a fire still raged. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I couldn't go back to my apartment, where another call from my mother or Chloe might be waiting. I walked for a long time, wandering through the streets of Boston, trying to sort through my thoughts. The quiet of the city after the screams and shouts of the wedding was a relief. I felt a sense of turmoil within me. I had just destroyed my sister's wedding and humiliated my parents in front of their friends and family. But I didn't feel any regret. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had done what I had to do. I had spoken my truth. And I wasn't sorry for it. I knew they would try to retaliate. I had prepared for that. I had the help of James, who had helped me prepare all the legal documents. I had the support of Grace, who believed in me. And I had the proof, the blue folder in my purse. I was ready for the fight ahead. I was no longer the scared, vulnerable girl they thought I was. I was a woman who had found her strength, and I wasn't going to let them take it away. I found a small, dark, and quiet bar and sat at the counter. I ordered a glass of whiskey and sipped it slowly, feeling its warmth spread through my body. I thought about Chloe, about her face when David left. I thought about my mother, about her face, a mix of horror and hatred. I knew they would never forgive me, but I didn't need their forgiveness. I only needed my freedom. As I sat there looking into my glass of whiskey, I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned and saw my Aunt Susan, 65 years old, my father's sister. She looked at me, a warm smile on her face. "Naomi," she said, "I knew you were here. I've been looking for you, and I'm so proud of you." Tears streamed down my face. My Aunt Susan was the only one in my family who knew the whole story. She was the only one who was there when my father had his surgery, and she was the only one who had asked me how I could afford to pay. She had believed me, and that meant more to me than anything. She sat down next to me, and we just sat there in silence looking out the window. She didn't say a word. She didn't judge me. She was just there. And that was all I needed. She took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Naomi," she said, "you did the right thing. You stood up for yourself. Don't ever forget that. You did the right thing." She looked straight into my eyes, her gaze firm. "Your mother and Chloe and even your father have been spreading terrible rumors about you, saying you had a mental breakdown and ran away. But they were wrong." She squeezed my hand again. "You acted with reason. You gathered your evidence. You fought for yourself. And you won." She told me everything. My mother and Chloe were telling everyone that I had a mental breakdown and ran away, that I had made everything up to ruin Chloe's wedding out of jealousy. "They're even trying to sue you," she added. "But don't you worry. I know James will help you. And I'll testify for you. I'll tell the truth. I'll tell everyone what you did." She squeezed my hand once more. "You're not alone," she said. "Don't ever forget that." Her words were a lifeline in the middle of a turbulent sea. I had spent so long feeling isolated, feeling like the only one who saw what was happening. Now, sitting in a quiet Boston bar with my Aunt Susan, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. We talked for hours, her voice, a calm, reassuring presence in the chaotic storm of my life. She told me stories about my father, about how he had always been a quiet man, easily swayed by my mother and Chloe. She told me she had always worried about me, but she had never known how to intervene. "I tried once," she said. "I told your mother that she was asking too much of you. She just looked at me and said, 'It's what families do. They take care of each other.' I knew in that moment that she would never see what she was doing. She was just blind." I nodded, a lump in my throat. I had always hoped my mother would see what she was doing, that she would have an epiphany and realize she was hurting me. But I knew now that she never would. She was too lost in her own world of entitlement to see the pain she was causing. We talked until the bar closed, and then my aunt drove me back to my apartment. She gave me a hug, and I felt a sense of warmth I hadn't felt since I was a child. I was no longer alone. I had a family, and it wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I had found. The next few months were a blur of work, business school applications, and weekly dinners with my aunt. My phone was silent. There were no calls, no text messages. It was as if they had all vanished from the face of the earth. I heard through Aunt Susan that David had left Chloe, and that she was a mess. She had lost her job, and was living with my parents, who were now struggling to make ends meet. They had even tried to sue me, but James had shut them down immediately. The money I had given them was a gift, and they had no legal claim to it. They had lost everything, and I had nothing to do with it. I had found my freedom, and it was a beautiful thing. I worked harder than ever at Harbor Financial Solutions, and Grace was a constant source of support. She helped me with my essays, and she wrote a glowing letter of recommendation. I submitted my application to Harvard, and I waited. The acceptance letter arrived on a cold December afternoon. I opened it with a shaking hand, and when I saw the words, "Congratulations, you have been accepted," I let out a cry of pure joy. I called Grace, and she was ecstatic. I called James, and he was thrilled. And then I called my Aunt Susan. She answered the phone on the first ring, and I told her the news. She just cried, and I could hear the love in her voice. "I'm so proud of you, Naomi," she said. "I always knew you could do it." A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it, but a strange feeling told me I should. It was my father. His voice was tired and defeated. He didn't ask me for anything. He just said, "Naomi, I'm sorry." He said he had been looking at the ledger I had given David, and he had been thinking about everything. He told me he was wrong to ever let my mother and Chloe treat me the way they had. He told me he was so sorry for all the pain he had caused me. "I know it's too late to make things right," he said, his voice cracking. "But I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I just listened to him." He was a broken man, a shadow of the man I had once known. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of peace. He had finally admitted he was wrong. He had finally taken responsibility for his actions. It wasn't enough to make up for all the pain he had caused me, but it was a start. I told him I forgave him, and I meant it. I had been carrying the burden of his guilt for so long, and now I could finally let it go. We talked for a few more minutes, and then we hung up. It was the last time I would ever speak to him. Today, a year later, I'm sitting in a small cafe in Boston, a cup of coffee in my hand. I'm in my final semester at Harvard, and I'm living a life I never thought was possible. My family is a distant memory, a story I tell myself when I need to remind myself how far I've come. I have found my freedom, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm living proof that you can choose your own family. You can choose to be a survivor, not a victim. You can choose to live a life of freedom, not a life of debt. If you've ever felt like the wallet of your family carrying a weight no one thanks you for, I hope you'll share your story. No one should have to endure that alone. And maybe by telling it you'll find your own freedom the way I found mine. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And let me know in the comments below, what did you think of my story?